This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. Now, here's your host, Kevin Pruitt.
This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, and I am the host, Kevin Pruitt. It's my pleasure to introduce another great guest for you this week. Our guest today is a serial entrepreneur. His latest venture, Handwrytten, is bringing back the lost art of letter writing through scalable, robot-based solutions that write your notes in pen. Developed as a platform, Handwrytten lets you send notes from your CRM systems such as Salesforce, your website, apps, or through a custom integration. Used by major meal boxes, e-commerce giants, luxury brands, nonprofits, and professionals, Handwrytten is changing the way brands and people connect. Prior to his current initiatives, he founded Sell It, a mobile marketing platform and mobile agency. Under his leadership, Sell It became a leading player in the mobile marketing space and invented the concept of mobile CRM. He's a frequent speaker on marketing technology and is presented for the Direct Marketing Association, South by Southwest, Advertising Research Foundation, and the National Restaurant Association. Also interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Variety, Washington Post, and many more. He is now a writer for Inc. magazine and his column Stepping Away from the Day-to-Day. Join me in welcoming my friend and guest, David Wachs, to the Marketing Umbrella Podcast. David, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to see you again.
It's great to reconnect. We were talking about, we're on opposite sides of the country here in the U.S., so our weather disparity could probably not be much different right now. But David, thanks again for just taking time in your busy schedule. And I mean, this has kind of touched on the business side of things. What's the personal side of David that the listeners might be interested in?
Well, I've got 2 kids and 2 poodles that keep me very busy, along with my wife, of course. So my wife is Canadian. I imported her, so my kids are into hockey.
All right.
And when I'm not here, I can be found hauling my kids to and from hockey games and putting on their gear and taking off their gear and worrying about their personal safety when they're on the rink. But yeah, that's kind of it. It's typical dad days, that type of thing. But it's all good.
We have done a previous interview on a podcast, on a different podcast, but yeah, I would love for you to just briefly cover your journey. How did you arrive at Handwrytten? Nobody graduates from Arizona State and says, "Hey, I'm going to start a handwriting marketing company here."
Yeah. So when I graduated college, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and when I graduated college, I was laden with debt, saddled with debt. And went to work in the corporate world, first for a consulting firm. This is back in 2000 on the dot. So back then, it was the whole .com boom.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if I'm not going to be an entrepreneur, the second best thing would be to work with large companies and try to create little .coms inside of them. So I joined this consulting firm. That's what they did. Basically, what they sell, like kids straight out of school, what they're doing is the glamour side, but in actuality, you're sitting in a windowless conference room for 18 hours a day, doing PowerPoint presentations. So that lost its luster after 3 years, and then I went to.
But you're going to say 3 days.
Yeah, well, it did, but I left after 3 years and became a investment banker analyst for CSFB, Credit Suisse First Boston, and I analyzed small tech stocks. And then I went to a venture capital firm, and that was a disaster, best told over beers. But my whole experience in San Diego was a total disaster, to the point I had people showing up on my doorstep doing that fist in hand motion, and I got fired and evicted and in a car accident and it flooded, all this within 4 months. It was a total disaster. So I left San Diego with my head between my legs, went back to Scottsdale, Arizona, where I grew up, and I started this company called Sell It, which at the time was our first service was focused on real estate, to text in for info on properties. It wasn't my favorite idea, but it was an idea and I was desperate and I needed a job. And so I started this thing. I was on unemployment, kind of camping out in a house or a condo my father owned for a solid year, programming house for sale. And then I was dating a girl back in Chicago at the time. And I'd go back to visit her and I'd walk up Southport Avenue, which is a street full of bars. And I thought, gee, what if we did something with text messaging to help promote these bars?
Wow.
So I created a second thing called Coupon Zap, so bars could send out drink alerts and that type of thing. Well, house for sale, while we continued down the real estate side, never really made any money with real estate, but the text in for info started being used by commercial real estate where there was money, and Marie Claire Magazine, Auto Trader, For Rent, all
Yeah.
these kind of, at the time, and I know they're all dead now, but you'd go to the supermarket and you'd pick up these little magazines for like For Rent or Auto
Yeah.
Trader,
Yeah.
and they were
Remember.
trying to tie their offline presence to their online presence. And they did this through our service where you could text in for info on a car or a house or an apartment, whatever. And we powered all that. And then the texting platform, Coupons app for restaurants and bars, yeah, we had restaurants and bars, but we also had Abercrombie and Fitch and Toys R Us and Sam's Club. So by the end, we were sending about 1 million messages a day on behalf of these large brands. Wow. And I sold that company to a marketing firm based in Detroit called ePrize, which renamed itself Hello World because they got acquired, and worked for them for 2 years. And then once my 2-year lockup was done, the very next day I started Handwrytten because I saw that all this digital communication, whether it's texting that I was guilty for, or emails, or Slack, or Twitter, or Facebook, or anything else, it was all just becoming noise. I was overwhelmed by it, and I figured other people were too. But when I'd walk by the offices of my employees, I'd see handwritten notes that they'd receive on display. So not only were they open and read, but they're kept and savored and put on display. So I thought maybe I could do something with this and try to figure out a way to scale handwritten outreach. So that's what we've been doing for the past 9 years. Is I started this company called Handwrytten. We use robots to automate handwritten notes. We have 175 robots. We're the largest in the world that does this, doing 20,000 notes a day on behalf of everything from realtors to luxury brands to you name it. So that's what we do. Is we're trying to. Our goal is to make sending a handwritten note easy or easier than sending an email. So that's kind
of. I
of.
think you've accomplished that.
Yeah, it's getting there. I mean, a lot of it comes down to automation, and we have a really good automation stack. So
I want to touch on something you said just a moment ago. I actually had made a note about that, and I think it really is about noise.
Yeah.
You know, I love the the reference that you made right then, because we are absolutely inundated with emails, text. My phone, I look at my phone and I have 1,000 text messages, and 20 of them are from my contacts and the rest of them are from these spam numbers, and I'm blocking contacts. And so I love the idea, and I also love the inspiration, what you talked about. I just walked down and I saw these cards sitting on people's desks and thought, had that voila moment. So talk about noise a little bit. Talk about the idea that, it makes perfect sense that a handwritten note would be, personalized, and it's, seen as higher value than just this random, spam text out there. But is there also something about, I'm looking at this, was this a robot generated? Was this truly handwritten type thing? I mean, talk in terms of that and the noise factor together.
Well, what I would say is if you look at one of our notes, especially if it's somebody's custom handwriting that we can replicate, you will not know it's written by a robot unless I ask you, hey, Kevin, was this note written by a robot? In that case, you will put it under an undue level of scrutiny that you wouldn't do it normally.
Yeah.
And you'd probably come up with yes. Everything else is typically, they look so good you wouldn't be able to tell. Visit handwrytten.com, click business, request your own samples, see for yourself, listener. But if you do know it's written by a robot, it's still setting yourself apart than everybody else, just peeping out and sending another email. And it's nothing new. I mean, if you think back to the Mad Men era of, guys in blue suits working at IBM or something like that, if the CEO of IBM wanted to send out a thank you note to somebody, do you think he wrote it?
Yeah.
Or do you think he had his admin write it? Well, he probably had his admin write it. So is it really any different than having a robot do it? But nowadays, and what's changed between 2014 and 2024 is Slack and Teams. Those weren't really around when I started Handwrytten. But what else wasn't around was AI generated content and these sales enablement platforms, as they're called. I call them spam engines, where, like SalesLoft or Reply.io, PersistIQ, there's a million of them. Apollo.io has one built in, and where it sends you an email from quote unquote Kevin, but it's a templated email. It doesn't look like a MailChimp email. It's just text on an email. But if you don't have the nerve to reply stop or reply leave me alone or reply anything, it'll just keep emailing you. Even though you never asked for it. And it'll be obnoxious emails like, bringing this back to the top of your inbox. I mean, how many of those do you get? And it's overwhelming. I mean, I've created a hotkey on my Outlook where I press one button and it generates response, stop, cease, unsubscribe, cease your spamful ways. It deletes the original email and sends that, just because I get so many of them a day. I can't handle it.
No doubt about that.
We're
inundated.
And then when you add that, and now people are getting extra crafty where they're using AI and all that stuff. But it's just, we're at this tipping point where if I were to sit down and send you the most personal email in the world, it still could get mistaken for AI generated. Which doesn't mean that you didn't have a lot of thought in your email and you didn't try to send me a thoughtful email, but the scrutiny that people are putting into email these days, they're discounting it to such a degree that it's kind of, it doesn't mean anything. Now, that could happen with letters too, handwritten notes, but we're a little bit behind the curve there, luckily. So we have a little bit more room. Does this mean that handwritten notes replace everything? 100% no. You still need to send emails. You need to send text. You need to send print collateral, whatever. But it's about surrounding the customer with all sorts of communication to ensure that you're constantly in front of them and getting your point across.
I do think there's one, and there's a number of differentiators, but there's one that comes to mind. And obviously, as you were talking, I'm thinking about, how I receive, even stuff through the mail. And I'm thinking, if I receive a handwritten note, that I would never view that as spam. Even if they're trying to sell me something, even if they're trying, I mean, at least they took the time to, you can fill in the blank. And I think you mentioned this earlier. Maybe it was, I took this from another interview you were done, but it's not just printed notes on a sheet of paper, on a card. These are actually robots that are using, I think you said blue gel pens that where they're actually writing. I mean, it's ink on paper. It's not just a printed laser printer, note. So, and that to me, you can see the difference.
It passes the smudge test. You could lick your finger and smudge the ink. And it's very much it's a manufactured, not printed product. What I mean by that is it takes about 5 minutes to go from start to finish on any given note. I mean, first we have to we have digital presses, so we print your custom stationery to your liking. We then cut it so it's full bleed and looks beautiful and scored if it's a folded card. And then we have to feed that into a robot. We have to feed a nice toothy envelope into another robot and write out the envelope. And then we have to match the two together, QA it, stuff it, stamp it, and mail it. So it's not just like a laser printed junk mail piece that gets tri-folded and then tabbed, where they use those little stickers and close it off. It's a much more involved process, and unfortunately, the costs are therefore higher than print.
Hmm.
But it's one of these things you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
But because it looks handwritten, just on the envelope, it gets a 300% greater open rate than
Wow.
traditional print. And then what we're seeing on the response rates to these, um, unfortunately, a lot of our clients don't share response rates, but we have auto dealers that do. The response rates is 27x compared to traditional print, and about 3 times the coupon redemption rate compared to an email. So we're seeing some very, very high response rates because the least used mailbox inbox for customers is the one at the end of their driveway. Their phone's being overused, their computers being overused, but their traditional old-fashioned mailbox is not. So, if you're looking to differentiate, this is a good way to go.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, if I get a stack of of letters in the post in the mail, and I'm looking at it, I get three of them are credit card offers that I don't want, that will not even open. I mean,
Right.
literally just throw it right in the trash can.
Yeah.
But if I get one that actually is a handwritten, address on the outside, I mean, that probably will make it to the stack that I'll open. For
Yeah.
you were
And it
talking
might be
about
dessert. Like
it.
what I do when I get a handwritten note is I stick it at the back of the pile and I go through the bills first,
Love
so
that
then I can
dessert.
have dessert. Yeah.
So if you had to come up with and maybe it's not the one you're currently using, but if you had to come up with a tagline for this service, like four words, 6 words, 8 words, whatever, what would you tell me?
Between us girls, I'd say when it's almost, well, Hallmark slogan is when it's good enough to send the very best. Handwritten slogan should be when it's almost good enough to send the very best. The very best is actually sending an actual handwritten note, written by you. That's always going to be better than a robot. I don't care how good that robot is. But when you're trying to do stuff at scale, if you're trying to send out thanks to 1,000 donors or 10,000 clients or whatever, you just wouldn't get around to it anyway. So this is what I'd say is when it's almost good enough to send the very best.
And I can't imagine that if you have exponentially higher open rates, response rates, that I mean, it pretty soon it pays for itself. I mean,
Yeah, I
if
mean,
you really put it on paper.
we're seeing, at least with the auto dealers, where we've been able to figure it out, we came up with a 7x ROI greater than traditional print. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's certainly ROI there, but there's investment, unfortunately, that goes along with that.
Hmm.
And it's not about sending handwritten notes all the time. I'd say use it strategically between
Yeah.
1 to 4 times a year. I'd say at a minimum, if you have a high value purchase, after the purchase, sending a thank you note.
Hmm.
And then, ideally, you'd send a holiday note, you'd send a birthday card, and maybe one other touch point. That's it. Because if you send them too much, people are going to be like, give me a break. You're not actually doing this. But if you do it enough, you want to surprise and delight that customer or that contact. So you got to kind of keep it limited, but it's one more tool in the toolbox.
I think that I've done a number of these interviews and talked to people in the marketing space, and they always talk about return on ad spend and return on investment, and I'm thinking we're always talking about that in light of what's the positive ROI.
Mhm.
But I think that spam has a negative ROI too. So it's not just the fact that it's not effective. It's matter of fact, it frustrates me. It
Detrimental.
makes me
Yeah.
angry. It is
Yeah.
detrimental. I don't see that handwritten would have a negative, side
No,
to this.
what I like to do when I'm on podcasts like yours is I talk about the benefit of a handwritten thank you, not from us, handwritten with a Y, but just handwritten with an I.
Hmm.
And people are like, well, what's the ROI of a thank you? And
Hmm.
if and I kind of look at them and my eyes cross, I say, well, if you need to know the ROI of a thank you, I'm probably not the right vendor for
That's
you
right.
because,
And we
you
don't even, and
know,
I don't want to work with you either.
right.
That's
I
right.
mean, you're asking the wrong question, basically. In today's day and age of the internet, which is nothing new at this point, but people have an abundance of choice. They can use Handwrytten, they can use one of our competitors, they can use Kevin, they can use one of Kevin's competitors. They don't like Handwrytten, they can design their own Handwrytten by
Mhm.
hiring a bunch of people overseas and do that. Or if they don't like this product or that product, they can go to Alibaba and have one made. So when somebody makes the decision to choose you, you should thank them,
Yeah.
and it's not just ask for ROI, it's just thank them. And there's benefit there, maybe not in the short term, but in the long term there is. And there's also just this gratitude mindset. And, there's a book out right now called Unreasonable Hospitality.
Hmm.
And in that, there's a quote, Maya Angelou, and I'm paraphrasing, so I'm sorry, Maya, but people don't remember what you sold them or what you did for them, meaning what service you provided. They remember how you make them feel.
Yep.
And it's very powerful, how you make somebody feel. And if you make somebody feel appreciated, that goes a lot. It's hard to quantify, but it goes a lot farther.
Hmm.
And you can't, if everything you do is just micro ROIS or ROI, it's just, you're kind of losing the holistic viewpoint. You're taking this very Cartesian viewpoint, which and
Hmm.
myopic viewpoint, which is kind of silly.
Yep.
I'll give you an example, not related to us, but when I was doing Sell It, we were trying to sell a text messaging program. I believe this was to a major cosmetic brand, and it was relatively cheap. Everything they want to test, test, test. They don't want to invest any money. They just test, test, test. And they were testing and test, and they said, okay. And I was in the meeting with them, and okay, what will this $3,000? What's the ROI going to be from this $3,000 campaign? What can we see? X, Y, Z. And then I gave them the best numbers I could, and then we all got in the elevator together, and they started talking to me about this huge campaign they were going to do, where they were going to send their 10,000 best clients a $20 mug with their logo on it. And I'm thinking, have you done the ROI analysis on that? I'm guessing no. So people selectively decide, oh, this needs an ROI, that doesn't. But a thank you note, what's the cost to acquire that customer
Hmm.
versus retain it?
Yep.
There's ROI there. I could, but that said, I can give you a lot of quantifiable examples if you want from
I
other clients.
it's interesting. Nobody's concerned about ROI if it's their idea.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
If it's not my idea, then I want you to justify it by telling me how much what's the return on that. So give us a real world example that a company have just had, they started using this and they're like, wow, this is
Yeah. So
voila.
I have two good examples. Well, I have a lot of examples, but one of them is, um, there's a snack box company that sends out office snacks. And if I told this on your other podcast, forgive me. But basically, you subscribe. They give you every month. They send your office a box of snacks, and it's just a subscription. And if they screwed up and either sent you the wrong box of snacks or forgot to send you a box of snacks, they'd send you a handwritten note from us along with some extra swag, apologizing for the mistake, taking full ownership of the mistake, apologizing, etc. What they found was those clients that had the poor experience and were sent a handwritten note and the swag, obviously, which certainly doesn't hurt, they have a higher lifetime value than those that were never screwed up with in the first place. So then their decision was just screw up with everybody, raise all boats.
Right.
So that's what they decided to do. Another client, and this is getting very small time, but it's I think very powerful, is a piano tuner based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, somewhere in Pennsylvania, I believe Pittsburgh. And after coming in and tuning your piano, he has an automation set up to send you a thank you note. Thank you for the opportunity to tune your piano. He's not asking for anything. He's doing what I call a full stop thank you, just thanking for the opportunity to serve you. And then he doesn't have to see you for a year because your piano only needs to be tuned once a year. That, if you're doing your job, that's great.
Yep.
So then a year later, when he comes back to tune your piano again, he says it's a staggering number of times when he walks in to tune that piano and the handwritten note he sent a year before is standing up on the piano.
Wow.
So
Or
not
in the
only is it
piano bench or
open,
somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, not only is it
Gosh,
open,
that's
not only is it
crazy.
read, it's put on display on the person's most prized possession,
Mm-hmm.
typically, in the fanciest room of their house.
That's amazing.
And that is display advertising you cannot buy.
They wouldn't put my business card up there.
Yeah, and if I sent an email, they're not going to print it out and scotch
Not a
tape it to the
chance.
piano
Not a
or
chance.
a text message. So it's a very unique in that it has that staying power. When we send out a bunch of handwritten notes to prospect for our business and, we'll call people, say, hey, did you receive our handwritten note? Yeah, it's sitting right here on my desk. Okay, therefore, it works, right? Because you didn't just hit the delete key and you remember it's there. So, those are the big examples. I mean, we have nonprofits that use us to raise donation rates. We have automotive dealers that drive 27 times the volume into their dealership. We've got realtors obviously using us for prospecting. There's solar panel installers. So what they'll do is they'll go into a neighborhood, install a roof, and then they can use our platform to circle the neighborhood and say, okay, everybody within this neighborhood that is a home owner that meets certain revenue criteria, send them a handwritten note apologizing for us making noise in their neighborhood, And from doing that, they're able to generate additional sales every single time. So, and the value of a solar roof is certainly a lot more than 1,000 handwritten notes. So,
oh, no doubt about it. I know that we've talked a lot about, sending thank yous and customer attention and, hey, we screwed up. Let us make it right type thing. But what about on the front end? What about lead generation? What's the use case? Normally you wouldn't send just 10,000 handwritten notes out, just kind of shotgun approach. But what's the specific use case for handwritten for lead gen?
I mean, you can do that for the most part. I find it's realtors that do that. We do have a full business prospect. So we have a residential prospecting platform built in and a business platform built in. So you can go into our system, circle an area on a map, and if you're doing residences, pick renters or owners and their criteria, and then we'll send them, up to all of them a handwritten note, depending on your budget. And then we have the same thing with businesses. So using SIC codes, I believe, or maybe it's I believe it's SIC, not NAICS, but we can target all the lawyers or dentists or dry cleaners in your neighborhood and then send them all a handwritten note. We have all that data. I will tell you, it's very expensive to do that. It's not, I would not say that's the ideal use case because it is so expensive. However, also in our platform, we have two other tools. We've got a anniversary birthday manager where you can go in and upload all your contacts, and then and you could even segment. So some of your contacts get this message on this card, others get this on this card, and then we'll just automatically do it for you and just take that off your plate for both birthdays and anniversaries. And then we also have a multi-step campaign manager. So if you have people you want to receive a handwritten note today, in a month get another one, and 3 months after that get another one. We have kind of a system built up for that too. So we've tried to cover all bases there, as along with our integrations, which we have for Salesforce, HubSpot, Shopify, Blackbaud, which is a nonprofit one, and then major car dealership DMS systems, among others.
I could see the and what you mentioned, it could get very expensive. It's like LinkedIn advertising. I mean, you can that bill can go up in a hurry. But I
Yeah.
could maybe see using your current CRM, like maybe for a new product launch or a new service launch or something
Yeah,
like that, where
exactly. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
little
100%.
much more focused.
We worked with a retailer, a high-end jewelry retailer, and they had us, they were putting in a new location, and they had us target all high net worth residences within a 5 mile radius of that location, and just send handwritten notes to them because the value of their product was high enough margin that it could support
Hmm.
that. But
Yeah.
you got to think through it, and we're not going to push you in a direction that doesn't make sense for you.
So I before we get to the rapid fire question part
Sure.
of our interview, we talked a little bit off camera just before I hit record. I really wanted you to touch on kind of the AI side
Yeah.
of the AI integration in this service. I mean, talk about that briefly.
So we have three forms of AI. Don't forget, I'm a consultant, but my first job, consultants talk about everything in threes. So we have our three forms of AI. Number one is the writing. So we use, for a long, long time, we use systems to vary characters. So it's not two A's that are the same, or how we connect letters, all that. That's not AI. That's just good programming. But then we also vary the line spacing and
Hmm.
left margin. None of that's AI. But what we do use AI for is to bend the lines a little bit. So it looked like you tried to write across the
Hmm.
page perfectly, but you failed. You just got off track just a little bit. We use AI for that. We also use AI for quality assurance. So we use machine vision systems. Um, it was very different when we were sending 1,000 handwritten notes a day, but now that we're doing 10 to 20 times that, it's different. So we've created machine vision systems that use AI to ensure that the correct note goes in the correct envelope. But the one you're talking about is probably our LLM integration, so large language model. And
Hmm.
what we do there is, ever since when we started, you could go onto Handwrytten, and if you didn't know what to write somebody, we had a couple templates. Write a birthday card, and you could choose the birthday card template. It would say, you know, here's to another spin around the sun or whatever. And you could include that in the body of your message, and have it handwritten. Now, because we have AI, you have an infinite number of templates at your disposal. So I could say, send a handwritten note to Kevin for having me on his marketing podcast. And then it'll just write the whole thing. It'll know that I'm from Handwrytten. And it'll say, Kevin, thanks for allowing me to come on and share a little bit about Handwrytten.
Hmm.
And it's just built, it was just a natural use case, a natural use case for AI. I think a lot of what's going on right now, people are trying to sprinkle the word AI on everything,
Yeah.
but for us, it really is. It is just using. I mean, we tie directly into ChatGPT
Hmm.
to enable that.
So I'm certainly there is an overlap, in this space, and I think that you're probably just scratching the surface on what it can do or will be able to do in the future. But I want to shift right now. This is our rapid fire. I'm going to ask
Sure.
you some disparate questions. You're going to be going, why in the world does that what does that have to do with anything? But there is a method to our madness here as we jump in here. But before we do that, I want to ask you one other question. You mentioned something in note you sent me. Tell us really just briefly about your experience in Paris at Cordon Bleu,
Oh yeah,
or as the French would say, Cordon Bleu.
cordon bleu. So I went to University of Pennsylvania, which is in the news these days. But I was in this engineering business program, so it was a 5 year program in the School of Engineering and Computer Science, and then doing Wharton's undergrad business. It was a very intensive 5 years. In 5 years, I had two electives. One of them wasn't even the elective I wanted. It was just it was what it was. Actually, neither of them I really wanted, but it's what I got stuck with. So I came out after 5 years with a tremendously practical education and zero enlightenment. So I had this job at the consulting firm. They said they didn't want me for 3 months. and they gave me what I thought was a large amount of money at the time. It was like 10 or 15,000 bucks. I was above the moon on it. And I said, gee, what am I going to do with this summer? I have all this time and 15 grand, 10 grand in my pocket,
I've
whatever
got
it
a beater
was.
car. What do I need another car?
Yeah, yeah. What am I going to do? So I went. I always thought it would be cool to go to cooking school, and wouldn't you know it, Cordon Bleus had a 3-month summer program that cost exactly 10 grand. So I was like, it's meant to be. I went over there, and then I learned about taxes afterwards, and realizing I wasn't paid 10 grand, but it was
Yeah.
like 6 or something. So, but yeah, no, it was a great experience. I went to Cordon Bleu, and then they have an externship, which quite honestly, if you ask me what's the difference between that and an internship, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But I worked in a for a Michelin starred chef in his bistro, and then 2 days in one of his main 3-star Michelin restaurants, Guy Savoy, or as us Americans would say, Guy Savoy. He's got a place in Vegas at Caesar's Palace now. But yeah, it was a very cool experience. I have a lot of respect for chefs. Can I cook? Not
And
so
they work
well,
hard.
but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to tell you, the most frequent used word to describe my food was poubelle, which means
Yeah,
trash can.
it does. It certainly does. Yeah.
You speak French?
Well, we lived in France for 3 years, so yes, I
Oh,
certainly know those words, and
yeah, that's
yeah,
cool.
and have used them. So
What
that's
were you doing
exactly
in
right.
France?
Actually worked for a large nonprofit, so
Very
it was a
cool.
Christian ministry that we were, living there and doing education disaster relief projects all over the world. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
it's a great time. My kids still speak beautiful French. I speak French like somebody that grew up in Missouri, but there is a vive la différence. So it is yeah, I love that experience. But so we jumped into rapid fire questions. Here they are. So
Okay.
you've already answered 2 or 3 of those. What time do you wake up in the morning?
5:30, because between 5:30 and 6:30 is me time before the kids wake up.
And what time you go to bed?
11, 10:30, 11.
Ideal vacation spot other than the Cordon Bleu in Paris. Money not an object anywhere in the world.
I'd love to go to Australia, but uh, or go on a big scuba diving trip, something like that.
So, intersection of faith and work at all. How does faith impact the way you do your business?
A lot. I think without getting, I think you have to be a moral person,
Mm-hmm.
and treat your employees. I mean, we at Handwrytten, we have everything from software engineers and electrical engineers down to people that stuff envelopes, and treating those envelope stuffers with a high level of respect and dignity. And, is that faith, or is that just being a good human? I kind of consider it one and the same. I also believe in acts of loving kindness and charity. Handwrytten gives to a number of causes. Some are 501c3s, some are buying trucks to give to the Ukrainians direct.
Mm.
So we have Ukrainian programmers, and we've bought military trucks and to give Russia the big middle finger. So we've done that. But, in addition to that, Handwrytten, I believe in sustainability. And for every 100 cards we mail around here, we plant a tree through one tree planted.
Mm-hmm.
So we're replacing trees at a rate of 23 to 1. For every one tree we use, we plant 23. So I think all of that at a high level comes from some of my religious beliefs and upbringing.
If you were king for a day, what's one thing you would change about just the marketing space across the board?
I think this ridiculous ROI, micro ROIing type thing, where you're trying to find ROI in everything and kind of losing the bigger picture. That would be it, as well as removing some of the spam email. It's out of hand.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There is no doubt about it. And it has been so good to reconnect and just,
Yeah.
here, you've even iterated, from the last couple of years it's been since we chatted the last time. And I can, there's even like almost a maturity even in the way that you talk about the business. It seems like that there's just a slight difference there that you gain another level of understanding and experience and working with clients and able to share that story in such a lucid and concise manner. But is there anything else that I haven't asked you about? You just kind of want to wrap us up today and just tell people where the best place to find you online.
No, I would just say, think about that Maya Angelou quote of, it's not what you do or sell, it's how you make people feel. I think that's, regardless of handwritten notes or whatever, I mean, it's just having a level of hospitality in everything you do, I think is so critical. But you can find Handwrytten at handwrytten.com, HANDWRYTTEN. Click business and you can get samples sent to you. Or, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not active really on Twitter or any of that, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
Well, it has been a pleasure. I really want to thank you again, David, for just coming on and just sharing your expertise and really just helping marketing agencies grow and scale their agencies. David, thank you again. Have a blessed holidays, and it's been a pleasure to see you.
Same to you. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. To learn more, go to umbrellaus.com.